Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel once remarked that manpower without unity is not a strength. It can never be. Honorable guests, President Sir, and the august audience, today I am standing here to talk to you about the motion that strong states do not make strong nations. And I say this because of many reasons, which I shall delineate in the course of my debate. We usually might think that it is an intuitive idea that if we have strong state units, right, and then we'll have a strong nation. But today I'll prove to you that this is not the case. This is a very simplistic and often dangerous idea. Now, before I proceed forward, I'll briefly contextualize certain terms that I'll be using throughout the debate. First of all, when I say states, I mean federal units within a larger country, for example, the states of India. And when I say strength, I mean efficacy, I mean efficiency in terms of governance, law and order. I also mean the capacity of a state to deliver prosperity and well-being to its citizens. And nation here represents a shared belonging, a collective identity which binds the citizens together under a single flag. My prime commitment and contention today is this, that strong states do not automatically, and shall I say, not usually make strong nations. I will present three arguments in this regard. The first argument here is that strong states cause fragmentation of a nation. Now, when we think about strong states, we have states that have huge administrative potential, they have economic power, and this gives them the capacity to be able to then have their own regional interests being pursued aggressively. We have often seen that beginnings start from sentences like, we are doing better than others. Then they morph into sentences like, our culture is diverse and we are superior than others. This is a story that has been repeated all over the globe many times. And therefore, when we see such states, they essentially try to hoard all of the political talent, the capital, and they stop any sort of wealth redistribution from taking place to any other states within the country. And what this happens, this leads to fragmentation, this leads to secessionism. And if we were to talk about the motion in hand, you would think that the states which are federally strong, those countries have never been subject to any federated movements, right? But history shows us a different example. I'll take a very common example of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was made up of 5 constituent states. Now, these states had strong republican institutions and they had efficient governance structures. But instead of having a common Yugoslav national identity, these states decided to pursue their own regional interests at the cost of the nation. And today, we do not have a Yugoslavian nation. We have Bosnia, we have Croatia, we have Serbia. We do not have Yugoslavia because there was a bloody civil war that led to the disintegration of Yugoslavia. We also have the example of the American Civil War. We had the southern states which were strong in terms of their governance. They had independent laws. They also had economic resources. They did not decide to unify the nation, rather they succeeded from the nation. And this is precisely why when India became an independent state, it did not choose the American model of federalism. It chose the Canadian model of federalism to prevent this precise thing from happening. So therefore, these two examples show us that when we do not have an internalized sense of nationhood, states often lead to being vehicles of disintegration and not unity. My second argument here is that when we have uneven state strength, that automatically causes a weakening of national solidarity. So where we have strong states, these states have the autonomy to pursue growth and development without much interference from the center, right? And when this happens, that puts an onus of development solely on the shoulders of that state. Now, that state is not dependent upon any other state or the nation. It has to rely on its own self in order to develop, because we have given it the autonomy to develop when we say that this state is a strong state. Now, in these circumstances, certain states will invariably grow stronger, they'll be more industrialized, they'll be more richer. Then there'll be states which are not. And what would this lead to? This would lead to citizens in the states which are not rich and industrialized feeling that they've been abandoned, while those that are industrialized, they would feel that it is exploitative if their wealth is redistributed to other less prosperous states. And what does this lead to? This leads to resentment. This leads to the idea that we must separate. And therefore, we have so many examples in history which show us this. We have the example of Ghana, for example. That country currently is one of the largest oil producing states in Africa. It is also one of the federated states that has granted a lot of autonomy to its citizens and its states. Now we see a stark gap and inequality in Ghana. The oil producing states are rich, and whereas the states that do not produce oil, they are poor, and the oil producing states are not willing to share any of their wealth with the states that are not producing oil. And what that leads to, that leads to instability, and that leads to corruption, and that is what is plaguing Ghana since it is independent. Now my final argument here is that a strong state is not a predetermined successor to the idea of nation and the idea of preserving one's identity. Because when we think about identities, we have multiple identities that we carry: our religious, our ethnic, our racial identities. And we would think that a state would protect those identities. But a state would prioritize the protection of the identities that it deems to be worthy enough to be protected. Whereas a nation would equally protect the identities of all individuals who reside within it. I'll give you two examples to prove my point. Chechnya is an independent republic within Russia, so it forms a state of Russia. Now, just to conclude, Chechnya is a country that has been plagued by human rights violations. It routinely overrides the Russian constitution, and there's no accountability because that state has so much power. Whereas India is a country wherein we have the common belief and common notion that we as Indians are people who will be protected regardless of our differences through the process of law by a national government. And therefore, it is for that very reason that in conclusion I state that a state is not made up of constituent nation is not made up of constituent states. Rather, it is the commitment that we have as people that make up a state. It is our commitments that we must never forget, and therefore I'm proud to oppose the notion, and I believe that strong states do not certainly make strong nations. Thank you.